Let's remind ourselves of the question. Every country today has billions, sometimes trillions in debt. So who is all this money actually owed to? The answer, surprisingly, is not a single person, not a secret family, not a global supervillain. It's a system. But to really see that system for what it is, there are a few things you need to know. And no, not in some boring professor tone. This is 13-Minute Finance. Simple, fun, and straightforward. Welcome to 13-Min Finance. Chapter 1. Who's the ghost collector? Picture this. You wake up, scroll through the news, and boom, US debt hits $36 trillion. Japan's debt climbs beyond 240% of GDP. Countries quietly add billions to their budget deficits. And you sit there thinking, bro, if every single country is drowning in debt, who is the one actually collecting all this money? It almost feels like a cosmic joke. Like there must be a giant invisible bank floating in space, keeping track of everything. Spoiler, there is no intergalactic debt collector. So the real question we explore today is this. If every country has billions in debt, who is really getting paid? Let's begin with the foundation. National debt is basically the government's giant credit card bill. And when I say national debt, I mean only the federal or central government's debt, not local governments, not provinces, not cities. It also doesn't include your personal debts, credit cards, student loans, mortgages. Imagine your government holding the biggest credit card ever created. Taxes equals their income. Spending equals everything on the statement. Schools, roads, military, hospitals, salaries, pensions. And whenever spending is bigger than tax income, that extra amount gets slapped onto the national credit card. Over time, these shortfalls add up and create the national debt we keep talking about today. Governments borrow money in three main ways: domestic lenders inside the country, foreign lenders outside the country, the central bank plus financial markets. But here's the twist you didn't expect. The first major lender is you. Yes, you. When you put money into the bank, your bank does not let it sit in a vault like in some heist movie. Banks invest your money. They buy government bonds. They lend it out. They grow it. So your savings, they are indirectly being lent to your government, meaning a huge portion of national debt is owed to its own citizens. Bonds, pension funds, retirement accounts, insurance portfolios, all of these hold government debt as their safest and most reliable asset. Chapter 2. The Secret Loop. The world owes money to itself. Most people imagine debt as a straight line. Government, mysterious lender. But real debt works like a loop inside the economy, not a line. The government issues bonds. Banks and funds buy those bonds. The government spends the money. Businesses earn that money. Workers receive salaries. Workers save money back into banks. Banks buy new bonds. And the cycle repeats again and again. A loop, not a line. A cycle, not a simple transfer. Meanwhile, foreign countries also buy each other's bonds. Japanese pension funds buy US bonds. Chinese banks buy European bonds. European funds buy Japanese bonds. It's like a giant group project where everyone is borrowing everyone's notes. So a huge part of global debt is basically the world owing money back to itself. A self-reinforcing, deeply interconnected web. And this loop is exactly why the system hasn't collapsed, because the lenders and the borrowers are part of the same machine. Chapter 3. When the loop feels like magic. Here is where the loop starts to feel like actual magic. Why? Because the entire system runs on one very human emotion: trust. I don't mean trust like a motivational quote on Instagram. I mean, I trust that you will pay me back with real value. That's why the bond market is basically the world's biggest lie detector. It measures that confidence in a single number: the interest rate. Think of the interest rate as the price tag on money. If you look safe, the price is low. If you look sketchy, the price goes up. Politicians can argue on TV all day long, but the bond market just stares back and says, "Cool story, bro. Now show me the yield." When yields are low, lenders are chill. They're basically saying, "Yeah, take my money. You're good for it." But when yields jump, lenders are freaking out. They're saying, if you want my money now, you're going to have to pay me a lot more to take that risk." Now here is why this matters for the loop. Most government debt isn't one giant loan due on a single Tuesday. It's a messy stack of different bonds due at different times. Some are due in months, some in years, some in decades. When a bond matures, which just means it's time to pay up, the government has two choices: pay it back with cash or refinance it by selling new bonds. In the real world, they almost always refinance. They just roll the old debt into new debt over and over again. And this is why the total debt number isn't what kills you. It's the rollover conditions. If you refinance at low rates, the loop feels smooth, boring, and easy. But if you have to refinance at high rates, the loop becomes a treadmill that speeds up right when you're running out of breath. It's like renewing your apartment lease, except your landlord is the global financial system, and he's not asking for a 5% rent hike, he wants double. That is how a manageable debt situation turns into a full-blown crisis overnight. And yes, this brings up the classic question: why don't governments just print the money and pay it all off? Because printing is just a fancy word for something else: shifting the bill to inflation. Our viewers who follow our videos have already seen our video, "Why Can't Governments Just Print More Money?" explaining why governments can't do this. Let's continue. Sometimes the loop survives huge debt, and sometimes it breaks with barely any debt. It all depends on the big three: growth, credibility, and current sense. 1. If your economy grows, your debt becomes easier to carry. 2. If your institutions are solid, lenders feel safe. 3. If you borrow in your own currency, you control the game. This is why the US and Japan can carry massive debt without blowing up. They have deep markets, people trust them, and the world uses their money. Meanwhile, a developing country borrowing in US dollars, that's basically borrowing with a ticking timer attached to your chest. Let's kill one more myth: the idea that debt to GDP is some magical doomsday switch. Debt to GDP is just a snapshot. It doesn't tell you the whole movie. The real movie is about timing. How long does the debt last? What currency is it in? Can you grow faster than the interest? A country with huge debt but low rates and long deadlines, they can breathe easy. A country with less debt but short deadlines and rising rates, they are suffocating. That brings us to the maturity wall. That's basically the year when a ton of debt comes due all at once. If you hit a maturity wall while interest rates are high, that refinancing bill explodes like a surprise boss fight you weren't ready for. Chapter 4. So, what actually breaks the machine? Usually, the loop slams into a wall, and that wall has three names: rates, currency, or politics. First, rates. When interest rates rise, the cost of refinancing skyrockets. Suddenly, interest payments start eating the budget alive. If too much money goes to interest, the country has no room for anything else, and that kills growth. Less growth means less tax revenue. Less revenue means more borrowing. And more borrowing at higher rates? It's a death spiral. Second, currency. If you borrow in a foreign currency, like dollars, and your own currency crashes, your debt gets heavier overnight. Imagine your salary stays the same, but your rent doubles just because it's priced in someone else's money. That is what dollar-denominated debt feels like when your currency drops. Third, politics. Investors don't just look at spreadsheets. They look at behavior. If your politics are chaotic, if your leaders look unstable, lenders demand higher rates just to deal with the drama. Stability is an asset. Instability is a bill you have to pay. This is why a financial crisis almost always turns into a social crisis. The government cuts spending, taxes go up, people feel it immediately. That's when protests happen. And protests create more uncertainty, which pushes rates even higher. It becomes a feedback loop of fear. And then there is the scariest moment of all: default. Default is when a country looks the world in the eye and says, "We can't pay." Not "we don't want to," but "we literally can't." That one sentence freezes markets. It crushes the currency, and it destroys trust for years. After a default, borrowing becomes impossible. The recovery is slow and painful. It's like missing a mortgage payment, and suddenly the whole neighborhood stops talking to you. Now, here's a detail most people miss. Sometimes governments don't officially default. They do a soft default. They restructure the deal, or they print money to inflate away the value of the debt. The paperwork might look polite, but the economic pain still shows up in your purchasing power, your wages, and your life. Government bonds, especially from stable countries, are considered the closest thing to actual cash in the financial world. That is why, in a crisis, money runs toward U.S. treasuries, even though the U.S. is heavily in debt. Yes, the world sometimes solves its fear by buying debt from the world's biggest debtor. Chapter 5. The takeaway that makes you richer. Here's the mindset shift that actually matters. Stop asking the kid question, "Why don't we just delete the debt?" Start asking the adult question, "How stable is the trust, and what happens when that trust cracks?" Watch the indicators. Keep your eyes on bond yields, inflation expectations, currency strength, and political stability. Ask yourself, can this country borrow money long-term without getting ripped off? Because those details tell you if the loop is healthy or if it's about to snap. Now, let's translate this to your wallet. Inflation risk means cash is not safe if you just let it sit there rotting for too long. Rate risk means even boring bonds can lose value fast. Currency risk means a disaster halfway across the world can hit your bank account tomorrow. The point is not to be afraid of these risks. The point is to price them correctly. Rich people aren't wizards. They are just less surprised than you. They understand the machine well enough to stay calm while everyone else is panicking at the headlines. They know debt is just a tool, and tools can build bridges, or they can smash windows. Once you understand the loop, you stop being a victim of the news cycle. You start having a strategy. You stop reacting. You start positioning. And that is how a world that scares most people becomes a world you can navigate. Your goal is simple. Own assets that survive inflation. Keep cash for flexibility. Avoid bad debt. And keep learning. Because the best hedge is understanding what the crowd doesn't know when the panic starts. And yes, that is the whole point of 13-Minute Finance.